Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And in this week's show, we have Abe Blackburn. Abe uses they, them pronouns, and I'll do my best to honor that throughout the show. So if I make a mistake, let me know. But again, that's Abe Blackburn. And if you were here before we recorded, you know I've been stumbling with black men. So Abe is a technical consultant and owns a consulting company that helps startups and early stage businesses and some larger businesses as well to kind of establish their technical systems, determine what their tech stack is going to be like so that it doesn't come back to haunt them later. So Abe, that was a woefully inadequate introduction. Would you like to expand on that some?
You know, I think you nailed it from my name, which is Black Man, to what the business does. But yeah, essentially, I'm just that friendly tech person who people should go to when they've got problems with tech. You should stop talking to tech and you should start talking to people because they're probably going to be able to help you. So I help all kinds of businesses with anything from what on earth should I even be using to am I using the right things now? Is it in the most optimal way possible? Are they improvements that we could make? What the heck is AI and how could it impact my business? Like all of those questions are ones that I help my clients with.
I could talk all day about AI, but I have an unpopular opinion, so I'll keep it to myself. So,
No, go on. Let's hear it. What's the unpopular AI opinion?
so I have been around. This will be the third major technological revolution. I started when the internet was just taking off, when email was the killer app. I sold through that. I sold through the crash, which was an experience. I've been through obviously um, the mobile revolution, but the AI revolution hits a little bit differently, not because it's more or less significant, but because it's the first major technological revolution that we've had with social media. And in part because of the circles I move in, I work in the startup space. I work with a lot of startup founders and I work with a lot of VC folks as well. The almost masturbatory circle between AI founders and VC funds has created a hype cycle that is not only impossible for AI to hit, but it makes discerning between viable products and non-viable products. I mean, there's got to be, gosh, at least 0.5% of them out there that are worth it. That's my
Yeah.
speaking.
I mean, I mostly agree with that. I think that there's so much overhype, and especially when we're thinking about business founders, bootstrapped entrepreneurs, people looking to make the right decision. It almost feels like there's this pressure nowadays that you have to have AI or you're going to fall behind, or if there's not AI in your business, you're not even going to be worthwhile or hold up to it. And I think AI for the sake of AI is not a worthwhile investment. I think it might save you time, but it probably won't make you money. And there are clever ways of implementing AI, but it has to be based out of a need. Like you have to have a clear why, and then you move into it. If AI can help make the load a little lighter, great. But if not, I don't think it's a shove it down businesses' throats at all cost approach.
Yeah, that part of it. So that part reminds me most of the .com stuff when you had companies that like tech companies putting tech in their name because it made them more saleable. But the thing that's difficult with AI, aside from those things as well, is it's such a poor phrase. Much like cybersecurity or software development, it's such a broad category. With AI, you've got LLMs, you've got so many things that we refer to as AI. Some of which are really more machine learning than AI. Some of them more data science than AI. When everybody now thinks of AI, they think LLM, but LLMs really are probably the least impressive part of AI. And again, maybe I'm just being curmudgeon-y. I get probably 3 to 5 outreaches a day for someone trying to sell me an AI tool. And I've looked at many of them. Some of my friends own companies that produce them. And I've yet to see one that produces output that I would ever put in front of a client. So when I think AI, like automation stuff is cool, but content creation, we are years away.
Totally agree. I think if you can maybe use it for like idea generation
Yes.
or validating some research, seeing like, is this a popular topic? You can do it for some, what you would assign an intern to figure out for you, but you wouldn't assign your intern to like write the whole content piece for you. I think that still needs, if it's going to be worth anything, it has to run through humans. And if this is something that you struggle with, there are a plethora of amazing copywriting teams and experts and businesses out there who can help make sure that your content still feels like it's coming from a human.
I had an AI specialist on a couple months back named Anna, and that was the exact example she used. She said most folks who implement AI give it too much autonomy, and that they should really treat it like a potentially gifted intern, someone who
it's a
might be
tool in your
something one day.
toolbox. Yeah, exactly. Like giving it, I think we're very keen. There's been this like move, right, to talk about tech using more and more human words, right? We don't talk about it making mistakes. We talk about hallucinations, and we don't talk about like, shoving data sets through it. We talk about learning. We're using more and more of these words that are humanizing all sorts of elements of AI, but I think that's a bit of a trap and a misnomer. It's still just very large data sets that are, taking in inputs and churning out outputs. It's I don't think it's ever going to totally replace a human. Now, having said that, I think there are certain tasks that it replaces that are way better than what a human could do, because if you're using a human to do really boring, repetitive tasks, if there's a formula to the way that they're having to work and operate, then in that case, automation is going to be super powerful. And that's some of the stuff that I implement for my clients all the time. If you receive an email from someone with a series of questions and an attached file, and it's got an invoice number, we use AI to extract the relevant information, format that, and put it into a database, and then trigger a bunch of other stuff from it. So you don't have to pay someone to be there, squinting at images and copy pasting something from an email into a spreadsheet. Like, that's not a good use of humans' time. But creating content, talking and engaging with people, that is a good use of humans' time. And it's something I'm deeply passionate about it as a human-based like technologist. Is humans are freaking awesome, and we should be using technology to let humans be awesome. Yeah.
I think what you described is a natural growth of what we've been doing for decades in technology. Gosh, I remember back when I was programming in C or in earlier iterations of computer language, everything was more complicated. Then as the languages became, they progressed, like C# or Microsoft or Java, they became easier and easier to understand. And now, heck, we tend to trend towards scripting languages that are easier still. And yet, when you're programming something for Unix or when you're programming at the embedded level, you go all the way back to machine code. So it's, yeah, I think that's a natural outreach to some extent. Heck, even the way we interact with our devices. I remember working on the command line and trying to strip a couple kilobytes of RAM out of the background so I could run a game on my system. And then we went from that to GUIs. And I remember, gosh, the original Microsoft Windows was such a bug trap that we didn't even use it. We just played in DOS. And then now we're going in the favor of touchscreens. So I think there's just a natural iteration of interacting with machines in a way that's more human than it is machine.
Yeah, and I think that there's a full circle moment here. People talk a lot with AI about prompting. There's prompt engineers. There's people who will help you write your prompts. You can download the top 100 prompts to do X, Y, Z. And it's funny, I think, same thing with, I guess this kind of impacts recruitment and training. Writing a good prompt is something that you should be able to do if you've been a good leader and a good manager, because the best prompts have a clear why, they've got context, they've got a connection to a greater goal, they've got linked to assets that are going to help you do it. If you're still the kind of person who just barks orders at people, then you're not going to be good at giving AI prompts, because AI prompts are designed to give me all of the context, give me all this information, give me all of these pieces. And I think that the best leaders are probably the best place to create good prompts, because if if you've been leading your team, giving them the resources they need to be successful, then it's going to feel second nature to do that with AI, thanks to the evolution of, human level text processing with technology, not having to speak tech to be able to speak to tech.
No, agree. And I also agree barking orders is ineffective. That's why I prefer violence. No, did I go the wrong
Just
way?
command the order.
Yes.
That's what you're still wanting, that command DOS, because you want to be barking
Exactly. I
commands.
don't ask, Abe, I tell. Uh, but circling back to our original topic, so you help early stage companies to kind of guide where their tech stack should go. And I know, gosh, in the beginning, I think nearly every startup is in the same place. They start with spreadsheets, which is probably still the most popular database in the world, whether it's Microsoft or Google or whatever. And then they grow from there and they get to the point where they've got to start making more lasting decisions. For the first 2 years of my company's life, I had a sticky note next to my whiteboard that said overhead equals death. So even if it was signing up for a $20 a month SaaS, I weighed that out and asked myself, that's $20 I've got to make somewhere. So we joke, but for early stage companies, that's a very meaningful decision to make.
Yeah, and it's also a time consuming one,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I mean, I am a technologist, and also I just went through the process. I founded my company this year,
Woo-hoo.
and I know, very exciting. And I had a very clear vision of what's my purpose, what am I doing, who am I helping. But, I still had to figure out those questions of, gosh, what online banking system? And actually, what the heck is Stripe? And how do I connect it to this? And, probably easily
Why
the
do they
first
charge me
3 weeks.
points for every interaction?
I know, seriously, 3.5%. How do I
Yeah.
get that back? So all of those questions that are just a required part of building and setting up a business, they're tough and they take time. And I think that that's really what I end up focusing on. Is you can spend hours evaluating different SaaS platforms, and then you pick your top two and you get the free subscription or the free trial, and you spend time entering data into this and trying to learn this, but not quite getting over that like user learning hump. And just that's so many hours of entrepreneur and business leaders' time that's invested into that. So, either you end up stuck in a tool that may not have been the best fit, but was the one where you were like, sod this, I'm just going to go with this one.
No one
Or you
says
stick to a
Sawdust.
spreadsheet for the next 5 years and potentially face some limitations due to like a poorly set up spreadsheet. Because even as popular as spreadsheets are, a lot of people don't necessarily use even spreadsheets the right way, right? So
Feeling
it's
judged.
that crossroads. Sorry?
Feeling judged.
Listen, I love a good spreadsheet. My mom is this amazing data leader. She worked in IT spheres for 40 years. She had a very celebrated career. I was very lucky to have such a like data obsessed mom, because she taught me how to create pivot tables when I was 10 years old. And Jerry, I'm the kind of person that I did pivot tables for fun. Like I would create like really complex formulas. This is just who I am and who I've always been. So how's that for a credential? I've got 20 years of pivot table experience.
I don't know if it's a
Um,
credential or if you're mistaking this as a therapy session.
you know, I processed all of that when I decided to start the business at the start of the year.
Yes.
But so I love a spreadsheet. I have nothing against spreadsheets, but also because I know how to use them so well. When you see a spreadsheet being used to manage your content, for example, and you're writing in your whole text and your copy in a cell, or you're adding an image to a cell, or you're tracking all of this stuff, spreadsheets, clearly you're wanting to have a structure to your data and to your information, but a spreadsheet is primarily there to calculate numbers and host a large amount of information. And so it's those moments when my kill the spreadsheet nature comes out of, if you're using it in the wrong way, then it may actually be holding you back, and there may be a better way to get the information you need without that user experience of like clicking in the wrong cell and overwriting everything. And, you put in the date or you put in a number and Excel is like, oh, you mean April 2nd, 1999? Like all of that stuff, you shouldn't have to deal with it.
So agree with what you said. So let's take a step back. So I think that's the beginning of everybody's entrepreneurial journey is spreadsheets and basic tools. How do you counsel them? When does it make sense to make upgrades? I would imagine some of that's somewhat industry specific, but when does it make sense to make upgrades? But also, what process do you recommend they go through? So to your point earlier that I completely agree with, making any type of a change in your tech stack is very time consuming. I know for
Scary.
me, yeah, like I find 3 or 4 lists of the top 10 and whatever. I look for what I like. If sometimes I'll just see a deal breaker right out the gate, so I'll cross that off. I get down to like 5 of them. Then I check out their automated demos. Then the 2 that I like more, I go to the for realsies demo with a salesperson. And then, I make a decision and that's what I do. What do you recommend for folks?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm going to say something that might be atypical from some of that journey, which is I think that especially tech consultants have a reputation of, you've got an affiliate link or you're really trying to get someone into HubSpot or you have like a greater thing that you're pushing people towards. I will recommend the free option whenever I can. I think that it makes no sense to go into a tool that isn't the right fit. So I'm proudly tech agnostic in the sense of I really work with clients to help them through that process, finding the right fit, and then not just like throwing them over the fence and hoping for the best, but actually supporting with the implementation and the integration. And the key question that guides all of this is only grow when you need. Like, wait until the system stops working or is about to stop working, and then you grow, then you innovate, because you'll have a much clearer idea of what you actually need than if you're stuck in this like what if and shoulda, woulda, coulda spaces. So I'll give an example because this is something I see all the time is people will set up their spreadsheet and they'll have the very best of intentions. Let's say it's a CRM or a light list of clients, and they're like, all right, I'm going to track the company size and I'm going to track where I met them and I'm going to track the name of their dog so that I can reference the name of their dog in my next call with them. And I'm going to track the exact date of when I should next follow up with them, and I track all of this stuff. And then suddenly you've got a spreadsheet that's like 15, 20 columns long for you to fill in. And what happens every single time is you'll fill it in for the first 3, 4, 5, 6 with the very best of intentions. And then next time you'll get a potential lead and you won't have time to fill everything in. So either you start filling it in with really incomplete data, or you more often I see people just don't fill it in at all because they're like, oh, I'll just come back to the spreadsheet later and then I'll magically have more time to fill all this information in. And they never do. And then you start using Post-its and a notebook, and then you're like, oh, I should do a CRM again. And you create a new database and a new thing with all the very best of intentions. So I really focus on.
I am deeply offended by your comments.
Am I reading into your hard drive, Jerry?
As a longtime sales manager, I can vouch for the accuracy of that statement as it relates to CRMs in specific.
Yeah.
Because salespeople, especially, are notoriously admin averse, and if they don't see an immediate value, then they won't because they've got other
then
things
you won't
that
fill
they
it
have
in.
to do. Yeah.
And then you build tech debt, right? You build this like debt of information that trails behind you that weighs on you. Like I bet all of us, even I right now, feel like, oh, there's this thing I should have done that I need to do. It weighs on you. It takes up headspace. So I really start off with my clients of let's cut back all of those like what ifs and the shoulds and wouldn't it be nice ifs, fuck those. They're not actually helping you drive your business. And at this stage, usually with like small to medium businesses, you're gunning for growth, you're focusing on developing your product, you're needing to sell because you've got a mortgage to pay, and like you don't have time to be thinking about all this other stuff. So what is the core information that you need in order to support your business? Okay, you actually, for CRM, you just need to know the name of the client, the name of the person that you're in touch with, what stage of your sales funnel they're at. And pretty much that should be all you need to be able to operate quickly for the first few moments, right? And then if you are at the point where, okay, actually, I do need to identify, when's the last time that I spoke with them, because I want to have a system that reminds me when it's been more than 30 days since I've reached out to someone. Then at that point, you can add that date column. So really adding and growing and developing your system when it becomes too tight, I think that really helps to figure out what is the information that you actually need. And oftentimes it surprises people. The information you need is often not the information you thought you needed when you started off with your grand ideas and blue sky thinking, looking at an Excel spreadsheet.
I agree with everything you said. And the interesting thing is that advice applies outside of technology as well. So,
Yeah.
one of the things that I often counsel startup founders on is implementing systems and processes too early. We all have an idea of the way our business is going to unfold, and very rarely does that match up with reality.
Mm-hmm.
Almost never, I would say, does it align with reality over time. So if you're locking in systems and processes when you're still in the ideation phase, when you're just going to market, all that you're doing is robbing yourself of the biggest advantage of a startup, which is speed.
Yep. Yep. Time.
Yeah.
You're like losing it and wasting time. And then, if we're developing this model company that we're talking about, I think that's very much geared towards small businesses or early businesses. Then I think the mid-tier businesses, medium size, you've got maybe like 20 plus employees, you're really picking up speed. The biggest problem that you can do with systems there is creating and developing systems from the top down. So management saying, we need to have access to this information. So we're going to have all of our employees fill out these 6 forms, and it doesn't matter that none of them integrate and they have to paste in information multiple times. It doesn't matter their experience. We just need this data. So we'll make sure that they do as we say. We'll apply the command and receive this information. Creating processes from the top down, I find, never works, because if you're relying on people to enter and maintain information for you, they have to be bought in from the very start. There has to be a really clear why, and there has to be a what's in it for me. People don't like to do things for free or without like a clear vision of why. So
Or at least an understanding of why, at the very
at
least.
least an understanding, right? Like connect it in and then make it useful for them. If you're going to be gathering information, like timesheets is one of the biggest pain points. Who enjoys filling out a timesheet? It's a pain in the ass. Like it takes up time. Usually systems are super clunky and time consuming. But from a management perspective, it's really important to have an understanding of what your team are spending their time on. And it could directly impact your bottom line. And that overhead equals death, all of that is really important for business management. So how do you bridge that gap between, I need them to give this to me because this could impact all of our livelihoods? It just goes back to having a human-led approach to technology, like just the same way as you would motivate an employee through great training and resource programs. A
Violent.
system and a process is always connected to humans first. Why would a human do this? And if a human wouldn't want to do this, then get AI to do it. Implement a system that doesn't rely on human input. But that tension is one that I see all the time too, between we need this data. I don't want to give you this data. What a waste of my time. Why would I even do this? I see that all the time as well.
Agree. And let's talk for a second. So you referred to mid-sized businesses being 20 to 100. So outside of our world, so for those of you who don't know, and you wouldn't because I didn't mention it, Abe and I met in a founders group called Thrive. And it's a great group. Strongly recommend it. Reach out to Eric Harrison to learn more. It's awesome. But Thrive tends towards the smaller size of the business scale. So Apicero, I was the second employee. I was the president, and we grew to over 2,500 people. So as the company grew, surprising nobody listening, things got more complex and sophisticated because as an organization grows, there's greater requirements for reporting, moves through different layers. We had 9 offices in 3 countries. So again, there's international elements that made it that much more exciting. So when it comes to technology, do you think that far ahead? So, just real quick example. We started off on a Google backend. I can think of dozens of times where VJ Venkat and I at 2 a.m. we're sitting like this staring at a Google spreadsheet trying to figure out where we're moving one architect from one project to another. But we started there and then we matured into tools like Pipedrive and then on from there. Is there any thought given when creating the tech stack to that level of iteration? Or is it as you described earlier, where you're just looking at like the next leap? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think that I would say no matter the size, basing your tech stack development on need is always going to be a good North Star, because you could implement we see this, I'm sure you've seen it with the businesses you've worked with, of we should have a system like this in place because other companies or competitors do it this way.
Yes.
So in all companies of our size do this, therefore we should do this, and typically those are the systems that are going to fall down, be a waste of money, all of that. So I would keep that North Star of what do you actually need and build and develop for that need. And then that need, having a clear story for the need, will often help you with what the other piece we just said of communicating the need, communicating the why, getting buy-in from your teams, building that like engagement into a system or a process or a workflow from the ground up. Having said all of that, I think future-proofing like is an important thing to do, and that comes from like the sunk cost fallacy of, well, we invested in Salesforce or we got HubSpot and now we're just stuck into that because we spent all that money. I think from the moment you start realizing that something's not the right fit or that it's holding you back, like dump it
No,
and find something that's better, because you're going to waste a lot of human goodwill. Actually, when the first thing that goes when systems break down is that humans are the ones that are left like holding it together. And so then you develop this like hidden factory of, you may not know at a managerial level just how bad your systems are because your teams were trained by their teams, were trained by the teams before then. And you may not even realize that it's taking like a workaround of a workaround of a workaround to maintain a process. So humans are more likely to break before tech breaks because humans will like hold it all together, which is what it all comes back to humans. This is, my philosophy around this is that's why it's so important. So it's rarely worth, trying to cobble together and keep a system that's not the right fit for you. Just dump it, find another implementation, work with a tech consultant if you don't know where to look, make sure that you've got something that is custom fit and geared towards your needs right now, and like have a few ideas of where you want to go. Right now, we don't need to take online payments, but eventually we do. So let's make sure that we've got a form builder that has payment implementations within it. Have that level of future proofing, but I don't think it can be 5 years out. I would say it's like 3 to 6 months out, really.
Agree. And you said something that again applies beyond tech consulting. Competitive intelligence and how your competitors do things is and will always be useful data. But it's just that, it's data. That they do it that way may be a sign that you should consider it, but it's not a rule. And even though they're your competitors doesn't mean that they're structured or their business model is the same as yours. So the tools they use that make sense for them might not make any sense for you. Or they could be a different size and they're iterations ahead or behind you. So
Yep.
That's useful data, or as my mom used to always say, it's grist for the mill. It's good stuff to have, but not a rule.
Yeah, and different cultures too, right? I think that that's a really important piece of all of this is if you're building a dev team, a bunch of nerds who love clicking buttons and don't mind a bit of complexity because they've just got higher levels of digital literacy, then you can probably afford a slightly more complex, user input heavy model. But if you're working with, I'm going to say it, a sales team who they're on their feet, they don't have time to fill in a 20-point form every time. You have to adjust and adapt the process to the people who are using it. And that, I think, that supports what you were saying. Just because your competitors are using it doesn't mean it'll be a cultural fit for you either.
Huge. And you've mentioned the people first position a couple of times. And one of the things that we talk about in my book, Destination Employers, the EFG leadership framework. And if you're implementing that or something like it, what Abe is describing is so much easier. E, engage with your team so they feel heard and valued. You know what's going on in their heads. F, fulfillment. Make sure that their mission and values align with your company's mission and values, that you understand, again, what drives them so that they feel fulfilled in what they're doing. A person who's fulfilled by what they're doing is going to be more vocal because they have a bigger vested interest in the outcome. They know losing this job means losing something valuable to them. And then G, growth. Make sure that they're consistently afford the opportunity to grow their skills and their responsibilities. In my experience doing this 30 years, if you implement that, as long as someone feels heard and valued, their values are in alignment with your company and they're growing, they're incentivized to stay, they're not going to leave. It's when one of those three things breaks that they leave. Growth is the most common. Once you hit the ceiling, especially as a technical person, and your skills start to atrophy, you're damaging your career, you're out. But the E part is what you're talking about, Abe, which is if you've got, as the leader, systems in place that are at best a negative for that person, at worst they actively dislike. Again, some of its work is work, and there's always going to be elements we don't like. But if that's a curable problem, or the majority of the team feels that way, that's a solvable problem you should be solving.
Couldn't agree more, Jerry. I think that's such a good framework to have in mind, and it applies so well here too. And we nowadays you can't afford to waste good humans, good employees on a shitty system. Like, I think really that's ultimately what's at stake here. Is for a long time you could get away by having an intern or a relatively cheap resource be your admin database manager, and their job was to copy paste things from one place to another all day long. Nowadays you can't afford to have people stuck in jobs like that because that's not fulfilling, that's not growth, that's not of interest. And it's also, nowadays there are better ways of doing that. I think maybe 10 years ago, when integrations and APIs and dev teams were more expensive and harder to come by, maybe at that point there could have been a cost benefit decision of this person's salary is cheaper to us than custom building and an API interface and all of this. But nowadays, when you can have an AI prompt that says, find information in this spreadsheet that matches this row in this spreadsheet, update that row with this information, and you can write a prompt like that, and it can replace that entire person's job, I think there's much less appetite from folks in roles like that. They're like, why am I stuck doing this? Like, why do you not care about my development and my resources and my unique skill sets as a human, what I bring to the table, versus an AI agent that's just very good at doing what it's told?
100%. So what types of companies do you typically work with, Abe?
It depends. I think that when you zoom out far enough, I think a lot of tech problems all blur together. It's what am I looking at? What do I need it for? And how do I implement it? But there's been, so far, I'm only 7 months in, so this is also 7 months of learning so far, but I've got actually a good spread between small businesses are usually ones where I'll support with a custom implementation or a custom build. We'll take a look at their spreadsheets and we'll help them graduate into a tool that's a little better set for them. Or we'll look at the two SaaS platforms that they were bullied into a trial, and they're paying 20, 30, 40 bucks a month for, and they're using 20% of the features but they're paying 100% of the cost. I'll help them move off their platforms that aren't serving them, and either get them into the right tool, or in cases where there's not a right tool, I can also build them a completely custom system through a program called Notion. So that's mostly tiered towards small businesses. Jerry's making faces. If you're watching the video, Jerry's making faces because in Thrive, our entrepreneur community that he mentioned earlier, I mention Notion all the time. I'm a total Notion nerd. Jerry teases me relentlessly
Filthy
about
lines.
I'm just staying on message, Jerry. I've got like a brand to
It's about
uphold.
consistent branding.
There you go. Exactly. See? So a lot of my smaller clients are at the size where they don't need a HubSpot or a Salesforce, but they do need something that's better than a spreadsheet. So I come in and build there. My mid-sized clients, usually where I help out with them is more on the kind of like top level of the funnel of tech consulting. So auditing their current tools, getting an understanding of where there's pitfalls, where there may be redundancies or innovation opportunities, doing that engagement piece of auditing teams, actually asking people, what do you think of this tool? How are you using it? Where are the areas of friction? Gathering detailed reports and then feeding back to them with recommendations and next steps. And then I have it's a very sexy service. So I just want your listeners to prepare for this. Oof. It's a risk and auditing and governance service.
Everyone's favorite topic.
Seriously, this one just sells like hotcakes. No, but that's mostly geared towards larger businesses. I'm talking like global, multinational, multi-brand levels, and that's a um, a custom service that I created in my previous role that's all around how you can audit access to social media pages. People might not think about this, but when you're looking at a team like Oreo, Oreo is not managed by an intern in an office somewhere. Oreo has entire huge teams and marketing teams and ad teams and IT teams that are connected into making sure that their online presence is working. So I come in and I help large scale teams to make sure that they're doing it safely, that they're following a governance process, that they're compliant with that process. So it's not as sexy and fun as Notion, but it is very critical work, and it's why I'm still offering it now in the business. And that by definition applies to brands and companies that have multiple pages on social, multiple points of contact. So, Redbeard may not be a good fit because you've got a couple social pages that are expertly run and I'm sure very securely managed.
So, words I never thought I would hear in my life in that order are, it's not as sexy as Notion. That's the phrase that I thought I would go my whole life without hearing. So, Abe, let me ask you this. Folks that want to get in touch with you and learn more, what's the best way that they can do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/A Blackburn. That's where you'll find a lot of my posts and a lot of like hot takes, like some of the ones you heard today, and many more. I post them on there. And then I have a website, abacusblackburn.consulting. But please give me some wiggle room because I just set that up and it's still got a like GoDaddy placeholder. So it's on my list to come back and edit and optimize. But yeah, so LinkedIn may be the best place to reach out to me.
Abacus Blackburn Consulting sounds like a noir magic using private eye service.
Sold. That's going to become my new tagline.
I don't know.
That sounds so much cooler than tech system. Digital rebel inventor is like one of the taglines.
So I don't know any of your flavors of nerd beyond Notion, but one of my flavors of nerd is I love to read, and I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction. And one of my favorite series is the Dresden Files. And it's an urban fantasy where magic is real, fae are real, monsters are real, but they're in hiding. And Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden is a magic using private eye. And I think he lost out not naming his firm Abacus
Blackburn. You're right. We should reach out. We rewrite the whole Dresden Files. Make sure that they're
and I think something in that breaking down to ABC is also useful. So
easy as ABC.
Yes. Awesome. Well, listen, we need to wrap up here. So if you'd like to get in touch with Abe, which I recommend you do, the links that they shared with us will be in the show notes as always. so you can get them there on the YouTube and on Apple, Spotify, wherever you see this. Between now and next week, when we do our next episode, keep being awesome, keep making awesome things, and keep running a great company. Thanks again for being on the show, Abe.
Thanks so much for having me, Jerry. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
You as well.
Bye, everyone.